I was diagnosed the first time when my daughter Helena was 5 months old, an infant. I was a new mother, 36 years old. There was no known cancer history, no known elevated risks. I had actually never had a mammogram. I was 36, so below the age threshold. And I felt a lump. I knew it was something, but I assumed it was maybe a new mother something, like a clogged duct or, you know, I was in the radiologist's office and she knew also right away. She's like, it could be nothing, but I'd really like to biopsy this. Should we do this now? Would you like to come back? And I laughed. I said, I have a babysitter already. I have an infant at home. Like, do it right now. Things progressed kind of quickly. I had an invasive cancer. I had what they call neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So it's chemo before surgery. And it was quite amazing. I could really feel that the tumor was like melting away. Like I knew the chemo was doing what it was supposed to do. Like most people undergoing chemo, I lost my hair. I bought a wig, a nice one, real hair. And it always surprised me when people would be like, "Oh, your hair looks so beautiful today." Did you get a haircut? And I'm thinking to myself, how can they not tell that it's a wig? What was difficult for me was that in between stage when I was feeling better and wanting to be better and wanting to be done with cancer, and you still have that like very telltale kind of short, wiry, weird hair. I just wanted that to be behind
Hmm.
me. I was actually at the 5 year mark, which is supposed to be really, one of the good milestones and benchmarks. But I went in for a mammogram, and the radiologist saw some calcifications. And initially, she said, "You know what? Let's watch this for 6 months." I went back 6 months later, had an MRI, and once again, they wanted to biopsy. And I mean, I think I was more floored the second time because I just felt like, wouldn't they see this early enough? But lo and behold, it was cancer again, and already an invasive cancer. I'd been through it once. My kids were a little bit older. I had a little bit more bandwidth to think about, what to do differently and like how to kick cancer's ass differently. And I had heard about these cold caps and thought that I would give that a try.
What's a cold cap?
Okay. So, if you just want to like picture it, it's sort of like a water polo helmet.
Hmm.
um, it's a pliable cap, the kind, that's filled with a like a gel. The kind that I use are sort of stand alone, these individual caps that then get frozen into like literally a deep freeze. Like I forget the details, but like a minus something Celsius. And you have them fitted and placed on your head, on your scalp, before, during, and for several hours following the chemo treatment. And basically, what it does is constricts the blood vessels around the hair follicles, and so it prevents the cancer drug from getting to the hair follicles. There's also a kind of cap that is like
That's
plug
what I
in.
had.
So for those, right, the
Mhm.
DignaCap, and I think now they have those at
They do.
UCSF. They didn't at the time. And so you don't have the same activity of rotating and changing the caps. So for mine, they're chilled on dry ice or in a very special freezer, and you have to monitor the temperature and then change them out, on a regimen, 25 to 30 minutes throughout the treatments. One of the reasons why I had a successful outcome is because those caps, you can really mold them more like securely onto the head, and it really covers more of your scalp. You do some other weird things like, put kind of like barrier cream and literally like maxi pads around sort of the edge of the hairline because you don't want to burn your
Hmm.
skin. The science of it is, chemotherapy kills rapidly dividing cells. Cancer cells are rapidly dividing. Your hair, so with your hair being kind of part of that, you're basically, kind of like tricking the chemo and keeping it away from the hair follicles.
Exactly. I put a astronaut helmet or a water polo helmet on my head, but the funny thing about the wetting, because Dignicap, you wet the hair. So I have, as you know, voluminous amounts of hair. And they come over the first time I'm having chemo to prep me with one spray bottle and a comb. And I looked at them and I said, "What are you going to do with that?" And they said, "We have to wet your hair." I was like, "It also dries fast." And they said, "Oh, it'll be okay." I said, "Seriously, I think you need a bucket. We're not sticking your head in a bucket." I'm like, "You're going to want a bucket." And she got halfway through and said, "Oh my God, your hair's drying." I said, "Yeah, I know." So from that point forward, my Dignicap prep, I had a two-person glam squad spraying my hair and getting my
Mhm.
scalp wet.
I remember my hair was dry. I'm lucky, and I have a spouse. I have very good friends. Look, I for most people, I think you find if you have a diagnosis or go through something, people really want to help. If you face a loss in the family, if even just when you have a baby, people say, "How can I help? How can I help?" Just like do something to help, bring a meal, whatever, sort of take some initiative. Look, in this instance, like I had a real way that people could
Mm-hmm.
help, and so I think it made them feel needed and good and supportive, and I couldn't have done it without them, and they wanted to be part of it, and yeah, they, in addition to kind of like signing up for whatever the slot was, the number of hours that they were going to be on the Colts Cap squad, like they would bring lunch, they would bring other nice, things, and it became a I, I don't know. I don't know if I want to say a bonding experience, but I think that those people who helped me through that um, will, I hope I showed enough appreciation to them. I really appreciated them and I needed them. But I think that it also, when they look back on my cancer experience, felt that they were really involved in a very substantive way.
Yeah, frankly, being with a friend, having a friend, and the cold caps are kind of ridiculous looking. So there's an element to you just have to laugh. But I imagine it was what I call a happiness tripwire. You're being cared for, they get to give care. All of this is releasing all these positive hormones in your body
Yeah.
and in theirs, right? The bonding, because it's serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. So you have the happiness hormone, you have the bonding, love hormone, and it's happening for you both.
My dear friend Rebecca, a college friend of mine who lives in Santa Cruz, I mean, she was there with me from start to finish. I mean, coming up to appointments in San Francisco, and as I was just making the decisions about the course of treatment, and she was kind of like a team
Mhm.
lead. My husband was the one who did the heavy lifting. So the night before, he would get these slabs of dry ice, put them in these two big coolers so that we could put the caps on, bring them to the required temperature, like, kind of lug them into the cancer center. And by the way, that this time I was down at Stanford and we were carrying it and doing it on our
Mhm.
own. And as I mentioned, there are cancer centers, including UCSF now in San Francisco, that will have either the DigniCap, the one that you did, the plug-in one available, or UCSF also has
Mhm.
freezers so that people can leave the caps there. There's a lot less schlepping around. But, look, not every cancer center is that, cutting edge or accommodating or thinking about the patient experience, right? If you're doing this on your own, you do need to bring in your own sets of hands to do it. The nurses actually were not allowed to help because, presumably liability. This was not part of the ordered care, and it wasn't part of what the nurses were responsible for. So they made space for us. In fact, when I came in with my brigade, we were in one of those little private rooms, not just, the lined up chairs, because we were with people. We didn't want to disturb the others who were trying to, manage their own treatment and their own care and might have wanted a little bit more quiet and less commotion. So we were really fortunate that they were supportive and accommodating in that way, but the employees were not allowed to touch the caps. And yeah, so it started with, kind of You have to take the temperature of the cap, make sure that it's just right in the sweet spot of temperature range. You have to fit it onto your head. You have to track the timing and be prepared. When you have a few minutes out, you have to get the next cap ready. Make sure that one, it can't be frozen so solid that it's not malleable, which is why there's this sweet spot of the cooling. Take the one cap off, try to limit the amount of time you have no cap, put the next one on, track everything, put the caps back in their box into the cooler, because each one was used 2 times during this whole long cycle. So yeah, it took a lot of hands, and yeah, they say many hands make light work, I
So
guess.
how did you actually coordinate all of that?
Literally a Excel, like a grid, and marking it down.
How many people would come with you to a infusion in order to be the cap brigade?
Yeah, it was like probably three at a time, two or three. My kids were still
Mm-hmm.
young-ish, so usually Dave, my husband, would make sure that we got there. We had the caps in. He wouldn't stay for the whole day. I mean, he was working, or someone had to deal with the kids, or whatever it was. So, he would help get us set up and do that heavy lifting, and then I would have two or three people sometimes stay for the whole day, for the whole duration, and sometimes would swap out, but we always made sure there was that like team lead. And also, again, depending on what the protocol is, there's several hours that you keep the caps on. I was only 20 minutes away from the cancer center, from Stanford, so we would also try to time it so that I had a cap on, the car was already being brought around. We would drive home and then hopefully get home. Not everyone has the luxury of doing that, depending on where you live, how far you are. Um, but yeah, it was part of the planning. It definitely took some
Well,
planning.
and interestingly, when you use the machine based one that I did, you obviously can't leave. You have to stay
Right.
until you're done with the cooling and you've warmed up, and then you leave. So you're stuck at this cancer center, at the infusion center, for 2 or 3 extra hours. So, did it work? Did you keep your hair?
Yeah, for me, it really did work. And maybe, Joelle, because my hair is a little bit thinner than yours, I wasn't winning any beauty pageants, even though I kept my hair. I mean, there's a lot of other things too. You can't color your hair. You really can't style your hair. You can only wash your hair like once or twice a week. So you still have to treat your hair and your scalp like very gingerly. And you might lose your eyebrows, you might use your like I wasn't winning a beauty pageant, but for me, I think it was really the after. And as I mentioned before, when I did lose my hair and had the regrowth, it was that in between time when I wanted to be like accelerating forward, and I felt like the hair was holding me back, at least emotionally. This time, that sort of transition, I found it much easier. There's financial implications. Even on the websites for these the caps, they say that the effectiveness is, it prevents 60 to 90% of the hair loss. It is very cold when you put the cap initially on your head. That first, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes of the first cap is very cold, and then your head kind of numbs a bit, and you become desensitized as the day
Mm-hmm.
goes on
Mm-hmm.
but still, the first few minutes of each cap, it's you got to breathe through it. You find your meditation, your own way of, but for some people, it's just that element of it isn't worth it. Or if you start to lose your hair, they say, you know what, I just want to focus elsewhere. And for those people, like if it's not for you, if it's not something that you can navigate and manage, like actually, I think like my message too is that's
Mm-hmm.
okay, and the hair does grow back. Interestingly, Dr. Laura Esserman, who was my surgeon, who's very renowned in the field. I remember that she told me, and she's a big supporter of these caps, which is why UCSF has really kind of proliferated them and made them available for their patients. But she said that there are people who choose not to have chemo because of the fear of hair loss. And to those people, I would say follow your doctor. If your doctor thinks you should have chemo, if that's really the standard of care and the best course for you to like live and be healthy, listen to your doctor and either try the caps, or if you lose your hair, just know that it's going to go grow back. It will grow back.
You mentioned the expense. Even at UCSF, they have the machine, but the cold capping, you have to either out of pocket or negotiate with your insurance company. Even though this is FDA approved, it's often not part of, it's not explicitly named as part of what is covered. And in the United States, that often means, therefore, it is not covered.
When I did the caps, they were not
Oh,
FDA
they are
approved.
now.
And I will admit, oh, really? Yeah. So I'm a few years back, and there are people, again, some of the oncologists and surgeons who we know well, who really went to the mat to advocate for this. And so I think it's extraordinary that they're FDA approved, which does mean that some insurances, health insurance plans will cover, and that more, hopefully more cancer centers will, bring this in as an option, even that they just talk to their patients
Right.
about. Um, we did pay out of pocket. Again, for us, there was also the dry ice, 40 or 50 pounds of dry ice each time we went
Mm-hmm.
in. Um, we, we got one of the, like an infrared thermometer, so there's other
Mm-hmm.
little, like,
Expenses.
incidental expenses, but the caps themselves we were rented, and then when we were finished, we packed them back up in these kind of little sort of shoebox like things they came in, and I, sent them back to the
That must
company.
have been cathartic when you sent them back. And we're done. You can leave now.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Right. I felt when I was considering it, Roxanne, I felt like, am I being vain? Like hair grows back. What's the big deal? And my sister in law was actually really terrific about it because she looked at me and said, why is it vain to want to look in the mirror and see yourself?
My grandmother used to say, if you look good, you feel good. That may or may not be true, right? Like you can look really good and be depressed or like have crappy things going on, but I think her message, in a simple way is that I think it comes back to the control. If there's things that you can control, if there's things that make you feel good, I think there should be no judgment either way. Um, I think for me, again, also it comes back to how I wanted to be treated, how I wanted people to look at me as a person, not just as a patient. So I don't think it's only about vanity. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and I think everyone just, if everyone has to make the decision that makes them feel good in the
I
moment.
agree. And interestingly, for all that cancer is a plot device in movies, TV, everything else, I haven't seen cold caps in the plot device. Everyone always loses their hair. And I think it's really important. You were the first person I knew that did it. I assumed when I was diagnosed I was going to lose my hair. And then I remembered you and my oncologist and Dr. Esserman, my surgeon, said, you could use Dignicap if you do your infusions up here in San Francisco rather than in San Mateo. I said, okay, let's do that. Let's try that. And, it
Yeah.
made a big difference.
I wonder why it's not in movies or that kind of thing. I will tell you one public figure whom I think is like awesome. I'm a Peloton person. I don't know if you're a
I am.
Pelotoner. So Leanne Hainsby, Aldis, she went through, cancer, chemotherapy, used the cold caps. She kept it very quiet from the public. She, in fact, would teach her Peloton Wednesday morning classes, like streamed online, her hair lightly pulled back in a ponytail. And then she would go from her Wednesday classes to the infusion center. Anyway, fast forward when she did finally, reveal her story, the cold caps were very much
Mm-hmm.
a part of it. She's written about it and spoken about it. So, I also very much respect that for some people when they're going through treatment,
It's
confidentiality and privacy is really important, which is another reason why people do this, right? Like, it you can look a little bit more normal and your privacy can be respected.
Let's go into the lightning round. You're facing chemo again. Are you reaching for the cold cap or saying, forget it, I'm going bald with pride?
Well, I mean, poo poo poo, like God forbid. I just really never want to do that again, but yeah, I'd go for the cold
Yeah.
caps.
What's the best $50 you spent during your cancer journey that others should know about?
When you actually are getting your chemo infusions, quite often you can taste like a metallic taste, or if you get a port, which is, by the way, something that was really important for me and made the chemo experiences easier for me. But when you have a port and the port gets flushed, you can sort of taste the saline. Anyway, I had a stash of Tootsie Pops and those Werther's candies, and I don't know if I spent $50 on them or more or less, or if someone bought them for me. Kind of, I don't really exactly remember, but that was an important thing to have in my kind of chemo
Yeah.
bag.
Yeah. And Trader Joe's makes these ginger candies that are also good and they kind of help with the nausea if you feel a little queasy. What's the
All
worst
right.
advice somebody gave you while you were going through this?
People are mostly well-meaning, and like with anything in life, someone can give you advice and you take it or leave it, but I think, the worst thing that people would do or say was kind of like either project their experience. Like I think it's important to remember if you're giving advice to people, like it may or may not be what they need or what they're going to do. So I think it's more about how the advice is delivered.
Okay. Okay. I often think it's best to also ask, how you doing?
Are you open to this? Are you open to hearing this?
Do
Yeah.
you want to talk about this? All right. All right. So if someone's building their dream team and they're going to have a cap brigade, are there any characteristics or criteria they should think about when selecting who should be part of this brigade?
Who are your people, really? Who do you want to be with you? It is a sensitive time. I think you want people who can make it fun, like you said, and make it light, but also know when to pull back, and when to just. You might just want someone to sit with you and be quiet, or like massage your hands or something. But so I think it's making sure that people are volunteering for the right reason because they want to be there to support you, not fill some kind of like unfilled need in themselves, and also that they can sort of kind of read the room and respect the moment.
Smart. Smart. So, for someone who just diagnosed and feels like everything's spinning out of control, what's your best advice for how they can kick cancer's ass?
Do I need to say just one?
Nope, you can say a bunch.
So yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's like just take a breath, slow down, like it is urgent to deal with your medical situation, but like you can breathe for a second. Um, I think bringing someone with you to your medical appointments, like I keep mentioning Rebecca, she was there, and to have a second set of ears, there's a lot of information coming at you, a lot of technical things, as well as practical things, and ultimately decisions to be made. And having somebody just listen with you or even take notes is really important. I mean, I keep name dropping my two cancer centers, and I would say, particularly for young women, and I was
Mm-hmm.
young, I was 36. If you have the opportunity to consider going to a teaching hospital, a research hospital, I would do it. I mean, the things that they offered to me as options, including participating in clinical trials, even the cold caps, and some other things, just really being on the front line of protocols. I would say explore that if you can. And then my last thing, like I did have a mantra, and I would remind myself through so many things, like this is temporary. And I just had to believe that. And, it's like they say, if you're running, even if you're exercising or running a race, like you could do anything for a minute, you could do anything for half a mile, and I had, whether it was those first minutes of the cold cap or just other things, the chemo drugs coming in or recovery from a surgery or even having to like sit out a party or holiday or whatever because of my health. Like I just said, this is temporary. This is temporary. Like I'm still me and this is temporary.
And thankfully, you obliterated it. You kicked its ass. And I wish you many, 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 many years of continued health and strength and happiness. It's
Yeah, back at you.
amen. Amen.
Amen.
So I thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your advice and your experience. And I love that you're so clear. These are just personal choices. And there's no wrong personal choice. Make the choice that works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, like if you try capping and you don't like it, stop, right?
Right.
It's fine. There are other options. So, with that, I'll call it a wrap. Thank you for being on Kicking Cancer's Ass. If you want to support the show, please like, share, rate, and you can subscribe at KCA Podcast, where I provide articles, transcripts, and more detailed information about the topics we cover on Kicking Cancer's Ass. Have a great day.